and that is as far as the IEBC riddle is concerned. And we are tackling commissioners' boundaries delimitation headache for dialogue committee. And as we all know, the IEBC says it is not ready yet, all right, at the moment. And this is as far as to conclude the delimitation exercise of the new boundaries, which again is slated for March next year because of the many challenges that it is facing. And of course, the big question that we're asking this morning is this a looming constitutional crisis? Because IEBC has requested for 18 more months, and this is to conclude the process after the recruitment. So the big question is, like we're asking this morning, is this a looming constitutional crisis? Is this a hot potato? And this is as far as the ongoing dialogue. We will be tackling that in today's conversation, and we are expecting Hesbon Owila, who is a political communications expert and political communications expert, all right? And we also have Nudin Akagai, who's the advocate of the High Court. And we have Peter Mushendu already in studio, governance and data analyst. Good to have you this morning. Peter, thank you so much for making it on time.
Thank you.
We are expecting both of them to be here, and that is Hesbon together with Nurdin. But let's first of all take a look at what exactly is on today's papers as far as the Daily Nation is concerned. And the headline reads, "Death on Campus." And what continues to say, still on the front page, is college should be a place where students go to acquire knowledge and hone essential life skills. But it is becoming all too common for parents to pick up the bodies and shattered dreams of their children. So why does it happen? Who is at fault, and how can young people get help? This story is on the higher education pullout, and it's also on the second page of the Daily Nation. And for some of the faces of college students and university students as well who lost their lives. And this includes Gregory Mutinda, who was only 24 years old, from the Technical University of Mombasa; Teresia Wawira from the University of Nairobi School of Law; Samantha Nyawira, Murang'a University, she's studying tourism; Ivy Wangeshi, Moi University School of Medicine; Mercy Jerono, who was only 18, from Daystar University, she was studying Bachelor of Nursing; William Mayange from Maseno University, he was studying Bachelor of Education; and June Jerob Kangogo, Kenyatta University, and she was a master's student. So that story, again, like we said, is on the higher education pullout and on the second page of the Daily Nation, and says they joined tertiary institutions full of life and hopeful of a bright future, and then they are found dead. And of course, the big question is who is at fault, and why does this happen, and how can young people get help? Very, very pertinent questions over there as far as higher educations or higher institutions are concerned, all right? And still on the front page, I will transform Kibra in 10 years, declares Ruto as he roots for his housing plan. That story is on page 4. We'll be looking at it in just a second. And something that all of us should be concerned about, and that is 6 in 10 Africans living with diabetes are not aware of their condition, and this is according to a study. That story is on page 12 of the Daily Nation. And still on the front page of the Daily Nation, it's a field day for 5-star Kenyans in Latvia outing. Well, the Kenya national anthem reverberated 5 times yesterday in the shores of the scenic Dugava River that snake through Latvian capital Riga and bows into the Baltic Sea. And this was to celebrate Kenyan victories in men's and women's half marathon races, alongside the women's 5-kilometer triumph and 2 team titles in the men's and women half marathons at the inaugural World Athletics Road Running Championships. And this is in Riga. All right, Kenyans continuing to make us proud, and of course you can see both of them celebrating. That is Kenya's Sebastian Sawe claims his first global title in men's half marathon at the inaugural World Athletics Road Running Championships in Riga, like we said. And alongside him is Kenya's Olympic marathon champion Perez Jepchirchir, who won her 3rd World Half Marathon title at the inaugural World Athletics Road Running Championships as well. Margaret Chelimo and Catherine Amanangole completed the 1, 2, and 3 positions for Kenya. All right. continuing to do us proud, and of course we continue to celebrate them. And on the second page of the Daily Nation, Survival 101, a student's guide to leaving college in one piece. Universities have often been targeted for radicalization and terrorist recruitment. And what it says at a glance is, first of all, how to stay safe in college and university. So try to stick to a well-traveled route and avoid being alone with someone you do not know or trust. Number 2, lock doors and secure belongings. Be aware of visitors to your hostel. Have a plan if you go out. Be aware of the safety services available excuse me, on campus. Report suspicious activity. If you are alone, use headphones in one ear only to stay aware of your surroundings. Do not let anyone you do not know into your home, and never lend your key to anyone. I mean, all these suggestions, but I'm just concerned, and I'm going to indulge you, Hesbon, here for a second. Should it be the case that, first of all, learners do not feel safe in schools, that we have to have proposals for you to stay safe in institutions? Should we, why, first of all, when did we get ourselves here, and should this be the case?
Well, I think there's a lot to that story than just what happens in campus.
In schools, yeah.
I don't think it's just a question of what is happening in our universities. It is a question of what is happening in our society, you know, and to what extent each and every member of the society, be they in the school setup, in the social setups, in other spaces like the church, contributing to an wholesome upbringing, you know, of this new generation of kids who've grown up with choices, you know. So, I mean, there's a lot to be done in campus because the responsibility that now we're giving the university administration is way weightier than the responsibility they were getting when some of us were going to campus. But I must say this, you know, universities and learning institutions must also understand that this is a new crop of students. The traditional way we used to handle students, and I'm a university lecturer, so I mean, you know, lecturing is one profession that no one prepares you for.
Yeah.
Unlike teaching, nursing, medicine, law, you're actually prepared for the profession. But most of us, university professors, you realize that you are technically some of the top students, and then you decided what you do is you further your education. So you've got papers, but you've not learned the trade of handling learners. So you're among, I mean, you're brilliant. You have a PhD, you've written papers, but you see, teaching is a trade that you also have to learn. And it goes beyond verbal disposition and the different methods of teaching, be they group work, be they, you know, role modeling, and so on and so forth. It goes beyond the classroom experience.
Yeah.
And that means that unless you got training as a teacher, you got you know, an understanding of the human growth and development processes, you know, the psychology components that are very big in education, you'd probably be thinking that your work is just to impart knowledge. And I don't think that is the work of a university professor. I don't think the work of a university is research and development. I think they need to go beyond and understand that this is a new generation of learners who've grown up with choices, fairly, you know, limited control in their homes. And therefore, there has to be a balance on how you're imparting knowledge and how you're helping them understand the world within the confines of, you know, rules and regulations. And I think to a large extent, you know, there's a lot of reorientation of, you know, that person who is facing the student. Not necessarily the institution, but the institution must provide a framework where the person who is handling the student gets to understand, you know, the human growth and development from inception. Yeah, I mean, from birth, all the way you develop, you know, things that Sigmund Freud talked about. How did they handle their Electra complex, the Oedipus complex? What stages of life are they on? What is the situation that they find themselves in? And I think it goes beyond, you know, what we naturally do in these universities and campuses.
Okay, you said lecture complex, and what else?
Oedipus complex.
Oedipus complex. All right, all right. Yeah, Nurdin, do you want to contribute to the same as well? Hezbollah says, listen, it should not only be the responsibility of the university, but, you know, because back then, children were brought up in a communal setup. Yeah. But right now, like Hezbollah says, you know, choices, you know, if I do not want this, I do not want it. And you really have no rights as the adults to dictate what should happen.
Yeah, and it's true. You see, in how even they do their own things, most of them these days are Gen Z.
Yeah.
And they are not put in a box. They can't be conditioned or panel beaten. So I believe, like he rightfully says, times have changed, and I think the universities need to change with time so that they also don't find themselves in a situation where they can't understand where the students are coming from. Okay. And so that also learning can actually be easy. Yeah.
Okay, I see that. And of course, Peter, we cannot be out of the same. What then happens? Should this start from parents, religious institutions, and even education institutions as well, just to teach and equip these learners with the necessary skills that you're not only just going to school because, you know, you need to study, but there's also this other side of life in campus that they should be aware of?
I think first, as parents, we must understand that we cannot continue to raise our kids in the same conventional way we have used to. We are raising kids at the age of the internet. We are raising kids at the age where digitalization is the key. At the age, I have a daughter who is 5 years. Yeah. Everything she can do now, I can promise you, at class 7, 8, I couldn't. So that tells you that you need to approach her with a new approach, because you need to understand how she's thinking, how she has access to information. And the same case as Hezbollah has said, the institutions must also rise to the occasion that this is a whole different system, that you need to understand that when that young man or young girl comes to that institution, you need to approach her holistically. You need to approach her from an understanding of the system that is there today. Because I think that is where the disconnect is. You will find, and I have tremendous respect for those professors who did their masters in the 70s and in the 80s. But they come to class to lecture. There is a whole world of disconnect between them and the people they are lecturing. Look at the people who are the topmost administrators in our institution. It will tell you there is a serious disconnect. And I think that is what we need to address, that let us have that connection. Now, it is easier for Hezbollah, being young, to connect with those who are coming, rather than have a good friend of mine, I will not mention his name, who is heading to his very edge of the prolonged retirement, to understand these kids who have been born the other day. So I think that's where we need to look at that disconnect, so that we can approach these students holistically from the point of the fact that they have so much information. How to process, we must help them to process.
Okay. Yes. All right, I see that. I'm pretty sure husband is happy you did not call him old.
No, he's not old.
He can communicate with the Gen Zs and whatnot. All right, I see that. And still on the third page of the Daily Nation says, even though my brother tried to kill me, he did not deserve death. And this is one Catherine Weremu, who wonders how long her guilt will last after her only brother, who was killed by neighbors on March 14th after he tried to kill her. And she says, the fact that he tried to kill me was no justification for him to be killed. At least they should have waited for me to heal, to give reconciliation a chance, especially since this was my blood brother. And it says it was only after she was discharged that Weremu learned that a mob killed her brother for attacking her. So that is what is on the third page of Daily Nation. Do you want to read more on the same e-paper, or get yourself the hard copy of the Daily Nation? But something that hit headlines yesterday, Kibra will no longer be a slum in 10 years. And this is what the president says. It says Kenya Kwanza administration intends to build at least 250,000 houses a year over the next 5 years. And the plan is in line with the initiative of eradicating slums, towns in towns rather, and in cities. And Peter, I'm just going to begin with you.
Yes.
Is the president fighting a losing battle? Because this is not the first time we're having this conversation about upgrading of the slums. Houses were built. Some people moved in, some decided to rent it out and go back to the slums. Well, so is this a losing battle?
I don't think so, but there is an uphill task.
Okay.
I was speaking with my dad, who is a bishop now, and he was giving me a story how he used to come to town, staying in Kibra.
Okay.
And we were discussing that discussion when the president was actually talking about renovating and making Kibra have a new look, and he was telling me he can do it, but it's a very difficult task because the people who you hear, it is true, people give up their good houses so that they can rent them out and go back to the slum.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the major setbacks in our slums, the biggest illegal connections of water, biggest illegal connections of electricity, biggest illegal of everything is in that informal settings, because even as a police and as a force that is supposed to enforce the good flow of water in Nairobi Water, as electricity company, Kenya Power wants to enforce that everybody pays. When there is a clogged system of living, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah.
And there are people who seriously thrive in that situation. And the cartel in the informal sector is the same cartels you talk about in tea, coffee, and everything. They make a lot of money. I accompanied a friend of mine working for Nairobi Water when they were going to disconnect illegal connection. In one instant, they would disconnect up to almost 100 illegal connections.
Yeah.
So I think the president is not losing is not fighting a losing battle.
Okay.
But there has to be a systemic approach into enforcing this to happen, because building the houses alone will not make them move.
Okay.
It is building the houses and enforcing them to move out of the informal settlement. And then there is also a political class that has benefited from that informal settings. That is how they campaign. That is their campaign machine. That is their campaign area. They don't want that place to change for their own selfish ambitions. And these are the people who are going to continue to sponsor people to reject this development. So therefore, I don't think the president is
it's
fighting.
Not an impossible task.
It is not an impossible task,
but
it is a task that would require a very serious systemic approach to enforce it. All
right. Hesbon, practicality of the same, 250,000 houses a year over the next 5 years. How practical is this? There's a lot of conversation about affordable housing. And again, still, this is not the first time we're having this conversation about we will build houses, we will create employment opportunities for the young people. But let's look at the practicality of this. 250,000 houses a year over the next 5 years.
I think it's practical. I mean, for an entire government system to dedicate itself to housing and say that you're going to build 250,000 houses every year, I think they've broken it down to 200 houses in each and every constituency, and then 200,000 houses in Nairobi over the next 5 years. I mean, for them to sit down and figure out those numbers, I mean, it must be something practical.
Yeah.
The biggest issue we've had is that it has never been articulated as something that is practical. Yeah. And you know, I come from this school of thought that strongly believes that meaning is internal and it cannot be transferred.
Sure.
So I believe the meaning that they have of this practicality is what they've failed to communicate to Kenyans. They've not sent the right signs and symbols to help us understand how practical it is. I mean, they've made a mess of themselves sometimes when on national platforms. But I think I like the way the president has been very consistent with this housing business, saying that we will deliver, you know. It was first of all a housing levy. Right now it is a tax, so it is just a slush fund somewhere. And you want to believe that the government will make good use of it.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that we have to be alive to.
Okay.
I don't think building those houses will contribute to, you know, much of a solution to the problems that we have.
All right.
For the simple reason, in fact, Kibra may not even go away. I mean, slums, unlike civil society organizations, are very self-regenerating.
Okay.
So you get people out of slums. It's not like, you know, everyone will be living in affluent neighborhoods. There'll be guys who will be coming into those slums. And I think, you know, building those houses in itself does not solve the solution, because people are in those squalid living conditions simply because they don't have a means of living beyond, you know, those conditions. And therefore, if you build houses and you don't provide the wherewithal, you know, to afford those houses, to live within those means of connecting power, paying electricity and paying water, what people would do is very simple. They would resort to areas where they can run away from these simple bills. And the other thing you realize is that, I mean, the guys who live in Kibra are not guys who are necessarily born and brought up in Kibra.
True.
If you're born in Kibra and you get yourself out of that, you know, socioeconomic status, move to the next, someone else from Suna East who is looking for opportunities in Nairobi will come in. And my thinking is, if it's a question of addressing the plight of the poor, housing is not the only plight. My brother here was in Migori County last week, and what they launched was the county industrial parks here. And it was launched in Nyatike constituency, which is not very far from Suna East, where I come from. And to solve these slum issues, you have to keep guys from Suna East very engaged in economic activities in Suna East, activities that would make them, not Suna East, in Migori County, activities that would make them build their own homes in Suna East, Nyatike, and the entire Migori County. They launched in 6 counties. So, and I think it would move to all the 47 counties. My focus would be on empowering these people to build their homes in those areas, and not to deal with just one symbol of squalid conditions that we have all over this country. All
right. So you're saying, yes, Kibra might move, but we might have Kibra 2.0, Kibra 2.3.
Kibra
very quickly, because we need to go on a break, and I feel so bad because I'm going to rush you, but yes.
Kibra is very dear to me because, one, I have played football in Kibra. There's a place called Calix. It's a football pitch. I have friends in Kibra, and Kibra is very complex because when you look at Kibra, for example, there are 2 issues you need to understand. There is a land issue in Kibra. The Nubian community got a title from the former president. They're still trying to see how they can utilize that land. And then the other issue is that there is the economic issue. So when you say, for example, you're building houses and the economic value of that area doesn't change, or people who are impoverished there, if you don't change their economic status, then all you'll do is you'll displace them from Kibra, and they'll move and form another Kibra in Gong Forest. So you won't have done much. And that is the reason why most people who were given those houses, as you rightfully said, they couldn't live as per what those houses wanted. So they went back into the houses that are seen as shanties, but at the end of the day, it's what they can afford. So in as much as we're building houses, we need to look at, one, the economic aspect of these people. What puts them in the slums? My brother said here, is not aware where people actually are born and raised in Kibra. I'll tell him for free, there are those who, their grandparents came to Kibra. So for them, wanajua Kibra as that's home. There's no other place. And there are those, for example, if you look at that road after from Yaya Center, that road, the new road, that road had some houses, 4,000 houses. Those houses were demolished. Those people were meant to be compensated. To date, it has never happened. So you see, there are a lot of issues that Kibra has that building houses that doesn't solve.
It's not enough.
So we need to look at it holistically. And as we look at it holistically, look at it more from the economic empowerment angle, so that you give them, you empower them so that they can be able to live into those houses that you want to you want to come up with. Because if you don't, then those who are affluent enough will buy those houses, rent them out, and these people who can't afford, they'll be displaced and go and form another slum. I see that. All right, so let's take a break. But when we come back, something else that I'd want us to go through very quickly, and that is registrar routes for more cash from state to political parties. What do we feel about the same? Let's take that after the short break right here on AM Live. There's so much to discuss on the other side of the break.
World Habitat Day is an international day observed on the first Monday of October every year by United Nations member states. It provides an opportunity for nations to share and reflect on their experiences, successful initiatives, and challenges encountered in their efforts to provide shelter and related basic services in a sustainable manner. This year's event will be marked in Kenya's warm and welcoming coastal city of Mombasa at the national level. Globally, the observance of the day will be held in Baku in Azerbaijan. The theme will be Resilient Urban Economies, Cities as Drivers of Growth and Recovery. Catch this conversation on Monday, 2nd October 2023 from 10 a.m. only on NTV.
I see you trying to be an OG like me, chasing dreams, pulling more schemes for wealth. But the best thing is
seems nice and bright and everything feels alright. I went to school without a fool, trying to pick a fight. I was loped out, crisscross shirts, and now I feel you know you got the hair on. You know you got.
For the best of the 2000s, tune in every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and Sunday from 8 p.m. to 12 midnight.
So live your life.
The night rhythm and flow.
Taking you back in the day.
Nation FM.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Tune in to NTV every weekend at 9 a.m. for Kids Adventures, the ultimate cartoon extravaganza. Don't miss the laughter, fun, and magic.
Selfish, 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 selfish.
And it's not just about entertainment, it's also about teaching valuable life lessons.
Let's practice sneezing into your elbow. Achoo! Yay! You did it!
I'm going to show you how to decorate a bottle using glitters. Let's go.
On this episode, we discuss about technology.
Biotech is undoubtedly one of the most important disruptive agricultural technologies.
What is the state of adoption and use of GM product today in Africa?
Egypt started, followed by Burkina Faso, and today many other countries are definitely adopted.
In the last 20 years, the first country to really embrace this technology was South Africa. They already had the capacity, they had laboratories where their own scientists were actually working on this technology.
Progress in terms of government's political will and commitment to make these technologies reach the farming communities is really suboptimal.
Yet.com.
How can you be so tough, Natalia?
Had I been, none of this would have happened. Police officer! Police officer!
What do you want now?
Officer, I want to speak and tell the truth. Hello?
Natalia.
Stop bothering me, you lowlife. Forget about me, get lost and disappear from my life. You will never do again to me what you did to me, Rodrigo.
Natalia, What did Rodrigo do?
Head over heels.
Mortein Doom, with its trusted formulation. It provides protection in seconds. So spread the Mortein Doom message of how we, you and I, can fight to end malaria.
Mortein Doom, Kenya's #1 choice.
Following the gazettement of Two Rivers as a private, services-focused special economic zone, the first one of the kind in Kenya, there is no better time to own a home at Two Rivers than now. Text the word Cascadia to 22365.
Okay. All right. Welcome back. Of course, the discussion continues during the break, and the show is AM Live on this Monday morning, where we're saying Happy New Month and also Happy Customer Service Week. From right here, from us at Nation Media Group, we hope that you're happy with our services. But again, if you feel there's something that we can do to better our services, please let us know, all right? But we just want to wish all of you a happy Customer Service Week. And before we went on a break, we're dealing with, talking about a little bit of issues here and there, and that is as far as what is happening in our dailies. But something that I want us to talk about very, very quickly before we move on to the other papers, because I can see our time is far much spent. So registrar routes for more cash from state to political parties, and the registrar of political parties, Andiritu, has called for the government to allocate more funds to political parties to strengthen them. So according to Ms. Nderitu, there are more than 90 registered political parties in the country, and the current allocation of funds is inadequate. And she says, we have been funding political parties since 2007. The Political Parties Act of 2011 allocates 0.3% of the national government's revenue to fund their activities. And she says, according to the Act, 70% of this fund is distributed based on the total number of votes secured by each political party in the previous general election. However, there are some Kenyans who are calling for the funding to be scrapped off. So, Peter, I wonder what you have to say to that. Should totally, completely abolish all these things, because we have so much on our plates as people, as a country? Well,
Annie Derito, I have to declare interest, is a personal friend of mine.
Okay.
But I vehemently reject this request by her, because if you ask Hesbon here and Wakil Noldin, for them to tell us if they have an idea how political parties, money given to political parties is spent, we have absolutely no idea.
Okay.
Every year I look forward to look at the audit reports for my county, where I come from in Kiambu, to understand how they have spent the money that they have collected or being allocated by government. I also expect to see the system of auditing how political parties fund is being used, because before you can actually ask us to add more money to political parties, let us first of all understand how have they been using what they have, because the Political Parties Act is very explicit and very clear on how they need to use that money. Have you seen political parties come to the ground to do civic education? Have you seen political parties coming to train people understand why we need political parties and what is the importance of being a member of political parties? We have not seen much of that. And when you look at...
We only see that during the campaign.
No, it is not. That money... You know, the thing is, this money is not just allocated for the political year.
Yes.
It is allocated every financial year. That including even this financial year, when there is no campaign, there is money allocated to political parties. How are they using it? Are they briefcase parties where the leaders of the party gets to dictate how money is used? We must be told. The billions we have put, because we are talking in billions, we have invested in political parties. Is there value for money? Have we seen political parties become active on the ground, that when they demand to have more money, we can actually say, give them more money, they are doing something tangible, they are doing something that is resonating with people, they are doing something that is being felt. We have not seen that, and therefore the request by the Registrar of Political Party lacks merit, it lacks ground, it lacks that systemic support why we should give political parties more money.
There's no accountability, there's no transparency on the same. All right, Hesbon?
Well, I think that this has been eloquently put by Peter, but let me just say this. You know, this idea of having people in offices and all they're looking for is resources needs to be a tradition that we relegate to the past. Before Anne talks about more resources to political parties, I think Anne has to, you know, do something out of this world to ensure that the citizenry understands what political parties do, not just during the electioneering period, but throughout, you know, the 5-year period, because democracy, as it were, you know, is a function of engagement with the citizenry throughout. So to what extent are political parties engaging with the citizenry? And I want to believe that with the resources that they already have, there are measures that need to be put in place. First of all, to ensure that those funds are released on time. They are not at the behest of whoever is the president. Those funds are released, you know, equitably based on the formulas that we have, and you don't have to have, you know, political brokerage to have the funds released. So I think if she strengthens, you know, the framework that you already have, and has a very elaborate mechanism through which the public can actually see that the money that you're giving political parties is entrenching our democracy. She shouldn't be saying that her biggest contribution is that there were more funds, you know, to the political, to the office of the Registrar of Political Parties. I think funds is the last thing that would celebrate her for. We would want to see something substantive that transforms that office and the culture of political parties.
Justify why you need more money. Okay, Nurdin, very quickly, and then we'll move on to our discussion really this morning.
You see, the Political Parties Act talks about the funding. That is Section 26. Sorry, Section 23. But now Section 26 says what the fund should do. And those are like, they're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. One is promoting representation in parliament and in county assemblies of women, persons with disability, youth, ethnic and other minorities. Do they do that, political parties? They don't. Number 2, promoting active participation by individual citizens in political life. Do they do that? Number 3, covering the election expenses of political parties. That one they do, because they return what they used. Now, the organization by the political party for civic education and democracy. Do they do that? They don't. Most don't. And so at the end of the day, and also bearing public opinion and influence. So you see, the fund it actually has some work to do. Now you look at the scenario that we have in this country. Political parties are owned by individuals. That is why you see people who get into political parties, be it to seek seats, most of the time are frustrated. And you see, once a political party is funded by taxpayers' money, that is why Peter is talking about an audit. And we need an audit because we actually need to know the worth of these political parties, the assets they own, and also the other sources of funding, because we know they don't only depend on the register of political parties. So it comes to a point where we need to understand what they own, what they get from the register, and what they use that money on. And if they don't, then who's benefiting? Because if the money is just going into pockets, then it means we might as well not have the fund, unless it actually does what Section 26 of the Political Parties Act talks about.
All right, I see that. Time is far much spent. There's so much to cover in our local dailies, but how about we just jump into the topic of conversation this morning, and that is as far as the IEBC riddle is concerned. We're looking at commissioners' boundaries delimitation headache, and this is for the dialogue committee. And just in case you're tuning in right now today, on the panel we have Peter Mushendu, who's the governance and data analyst, Hesbon Hansen Owila, political communications expert, and Nurdin Kagai, who's the advocate of the High Court. First of all, can we analyze the talks? Less than a month to go, and this is as far as you know, the National Committee on Dialogue is concerned. A lot of issues. Last week we saw, you know, a bit of tension here and there. Others actually walked out. Exchange of words here and there. So, Peter, I'm just going to start with you very quickly, analyzing what exactly is happening, and then we'll come back to focus on IEBC, which, first of all, it is not fully constituted. All right, and then we'll talk about the boundary delimitation and the big question, and that is this a looming political crisis?
Well, the talks is good because when people keep talking, there is less fighting and there is less shouting. So people actually speak to each other. But I am afraid that some of the subjects that are now getting to the floor of that committee do not have a legal framework of being there. Like, even if they were to speak about IEBC, and Wakili is here can actually guide us on the issues of the law, they would still need to go back to what the law says. And if they don't like what the law says, they will need to do an amendment of that law. And there is a provided process of doing that. So at the end of the day, whatever can happen at Bomas and at the talks can only be what we call proposals. It can be called wish list and everything. and there is a simple and a well-provided way of actualizing it through the legal framework. For instance, the issue of boundaries and what have you, I think if you ask me from where I sit, that is not the privy of the committee to discuss, because there is an established system and an established laws on how we need to deal with it. And if that process is not agreeable to everybody, the only way and the only time we can be able to change it is going back to Parliament and be able to amend it and have it read what we want. So therefore, the committee is doing a good work led by Shongwa and Kalonzo Musyoka. But everything they are talking about at Bomas, it has to be, if it is about our laws and if it's about changing what our law says, there is a provided provision in the law that tells you this is the process. So therefore, they would have to convert the wishes of those appearing in the committee, the wish list of those who have been invited, they would have to convert them into a legal process that is provided for in the law. Otherwise, if the law and the due process is not followed by the committee, then whatever they do might become exercise in futility. And that is not what we want. So let them keep talking, but equally, if whatever they are talking will be sound for Kenyan and it will be implemented, let them revert back to what the process of the law as it is in our constitution, in our law provided for.
All right. I can see the way you're looking at him and listening to him. So much to say.
I mean, I totally agree with him. I mean, the committee has within itself a mandate, and I think the mandate is to address what brought us to this space where, you know, after the 2022 general election, there were lots of issues. And you see, because it is dialogic. I mean, people are having a conversation, and I agree with Peter. You know, conversations are good. Discourse is extremely good because you can only arrive at an understanding. It is very difficult for you to have conflict while having a conversation. So, for the many things that we've felt as Kenyans that need to be addressed, issues of electoral justice, issues of representation, issues of contested, you know, positions, you know, in the executive as constituted right now, issues of high cost of living. All these issues, if presented there, can only have 3 tracks in terms of implementation. There are policy issues. There are things that you don't even need to deal with the law. And I think the Kenya Kwanza MPs and you know, representatives have talked about, we are already addressing the issue of high cost of living, because you don't need any legislative framework to change anything around that, including importing yellow maize for cows. So I think they are already doing stuff there. Then number two, there are issues that will go there that need some sort of legislative track. They have to go to Parliament. They have to be canvassed in Parliament within the law, you know, and acts that are necessary to ensure that, you know, they are enforced, implemented. So it won't, those issues won't end with the Bomas bilateral talks. And then there are also constitutional issues, you know. For instance, if we are talking about creating the office of the official opposition leader and funding that office, the bilateral talks will only harness, you know, how Kenyans, you know, vision that office. The same with the office of the prime cabinet secretary. You know, those ones fundamentally touch on protected clauses in our constitution. And that means, first, they will go to Parliament and they have to end up in a referendum, whether we like it or not. So there are those 3 tracks. But the fact that that is not, you know, a legally enforcing kind of committee does not mean that we can't talk about the things that we think are problematic. And I think that's where folks who think representation is a big issue are coming in, and they're talking about, we need to address the issue of representation, you know, that a member of Parliament must have an equal, an equitable representation of the people, whether they represent Suna East or Lamu East. The vote must count. And you see, when you have those conversations, there are also guys who will come and tell you, you know what, we are thinking that the delimitations of the counties did not favor us. So they'll bring in their issues. And I think the reason why dialogue is good is because then we'll have a conversation around that and say, is this something that Kenyans need? I mean, what is the value add when you create a county out of a sub-tribe that is probably almost extinct, you know? how is this viable? So those conversations are very germane conversations, and I don't think we need to stop anyone from going to present whatever they want to present, including guys who want the presidential limit to be 7 years. You know, those are very critical issues that we need to discuss, because they could be the basis upon which we'll move away from these contestable elections to a space where we can have an election and a country that is a going concern.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Nurdin, legality, illegality, issues that need to be discussed. Yeah.
You know, what's funny is that in as much as people would never agree, wouldn't want to see it this way. You see, this is just BBI.
Okay.
But BBI 2.0.
Okay.
You see, the president is not a fan of reggae music.
Yeah.
So he listens to Solomon Mkubwa. So this is BBI without a beat.
Okay.
All right? Because at the end of the day, the matters it's trying to address are more or less matters that were in BBI, for example.
Yeah.
You look at the things that they want to do. If you ask me, I won't lie to you. The main reason as to why we're having this discussion is because people are geared towards 2027.
All right.
And that is why they want to discuss about IEBC. You have to be alive to the fact that the law on the commissioners, on how you select commissioners, was changed months to the election. So as Peter rightfully says, for that to change, they need to go back and do what they did, or rather undo what they did in Parliament.
Right. Okay.
So at the end of the day, you find yourself in a situation where it's time to review the boundaries, the constituencies, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? Because you see, that's a very hard topic to some people.
Yeah.
So Article 89 of the Constitution talks about what you look at is the population quota. And how do you get the population quota?
Yeah.
That is the number of individuals in Kenya. You divide with the number of constituencies, that is 290 as per the Constitution, that's Article 89, or the number of wards where applicable. So now you find yourself in a situation where there are already those who believe we need to have a constituency here, a constituency where a politician believes that they can influence. So what does that mean about the word independence in IEBC? Is it just a myth or a formality? So one, we need to have a situation where we fill the vacant positions in IEBC. Because remember, we do have seats that are vacant.
Yes.
There are by-elections that are yet to be held to date. So what are we doing? We're stifling representation in certain quarters. So right now, they're having discussions. You know, it's because they were at loggerheads. They were fighting.
Yes.
And it's like now that there's some peace sign.
I cannot agree how
it's some peace sign. But you know,
constituted,
every day we see a scuffle here, a scuffle there. Some people wanted to turn it into Tyson Fury and Mayweather. They wanted to punch each other. And that tells me something. In as much as they talk about cost of living, their interests are more as opposed to what the people want. So you'd find yourself, if nobody has a problem with them having talks, but they need to be more people-centric. Because if they only solve interest of politicians, we're talking about leader of opposition and office. We're talking about how we put the prime cabinet secretary position in the constitution so that somebody feels safe and not fear a petition in court. You get? Because there is a case in court. People need to be alive to the fact. So someone has to be safe, all right? So you give them a position, and then you ask yourself, so the issue of cost of living, one party says we won't address that because we're doing it, so you need to talk about it. The other party says that is number one in our agenda. So at loggerheads already. So the question is, there are things they agree on, things that serve them, but we would want them to be more people-centric. You see, now what we're doing is they're giving people a chance for public participation.
All right.
Mark you, there's a court case where someone is saying the 7 days ultimatum for putting in the memoranda was quite short, because ordinarily it's between 14 to 21.
21, yeah.
So they feel 7 days isn't sufficient enough because you've locked out some of us. And that is why we need to have a holistic discussion. Nobody has a problem with them having discussions, because either whether they have them or not, someone in that discussion atachezwa. That is how it's going to be, because it is politics at the end of the day. You see, there's a famous line by, I'm a hip-hop head, there's a famous line by Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne says, the peace sign, this sign, can either be a trigger or a middle finger.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, we will know in the course of time, because every day we see new scuffles here and there. Someone is aggrieved. So what we would want, if the discussions are more people-centric, then they'll achieve whatever they want to achieve. But if they're geared towards interest, they will never get to a consensus. This thing will run out, and somebody somewhere will manage them until they know the elections is here with them. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing we need to do, and I believe, we need to sort out the issue of IEBC. Because, as you rightfully said, we can't have people who are not representing this country. He talked about issues of the counties. The problem we have in this country is one, and I believe this, we got it the wrong way. In starting with counties, you know, we are meant to devolve services, but we devolved corruption. Okay? That's what we did, and we have to be honest, from the national government
all the way to the county government.
So at the end of the day, we started with 47 counties. And if you ask me, those were too many counties to start with. Because now we're talking about having 50, 51 or 55.
55, yeah.
So it puts us in a situation where instead of devolving services, we develop corruption. So now we have a scenario where people during campaigns made promises to the electorates. Nikiingia nyinyi mtakuwa na county. The Kuria people were told that. Mwingi people were told nikiingia tutakata Kitui. So at the end of the day, you find a scenario where the politicians, whatever they promise, is never
what they're delivering. Is
exactly they can't deliver because it's not as per the law, because they don't have the mandate.
Yeah.
And so now you find yourselves in a situation where we're discussing about having 51 or 50 or 55 counties, but the question is, what have the 47 delivered? I'm not saying they haven't done anything, but at the end of the day, we need to audit what they are doing, so that we talk about having the issue of if they want to have them more or reduce, because now there's a discussion of whether Punguza Mizigo actually made sense. Are we being overrepresented? Is what we use our money on
overrepresentation and under-delivering of
exactly
of the services to the
do
people?
we send money to counties and then they're pilfered? Because you find a scenario where even those who are contractors or businessmen would rather do business with the national government as opposed to county governments. Because for a county government, for you to be paid, some of them have to know the governor, or you have tea with the governor. If you don't, you'll have to wait until kingdom come. Because we have those who are pioneer governors who have left counties with serious bills, people who have been auctioned because of delivering certain goods or services to the county, but they're not being paid. Courtesy because of never shaking the hands of the governor.
Okay.
So we have to we have to be serious in what we are doing, and also look at the issue of pilferage. We don't know whether it's true. We've seen rumors of where we've been told where those who are sitting in Bomas actually have allowances.
Yes.
And what I know from where I sit and for my interaction with these people, they can never sit without an allowance. So they would deny us, or they deny the fact that there are allowances. But at the end of the day, I believe if they want to solve issues pertaining the people, if that is really their agenda, as opposed to personal interest, this talk should be done by today.
Okay.
But since certain egos need to be massaged, that is why you hear a scuffle here and there. Because I believe the president and former prime minister have met, they have agreed, and they have a course. The challenge is the boys around them have to feel safe in the agreement.
Is. Okay. All right, allow me to bring in Peter on the same. So personal interest, parties' interest. Nudin says, "Kuna watu watacheza mahali here and there." Yeah. I wonder what you have to make to that, but also the fact that you know, the leaders, and this is as far as the committee is concerned, first of all, cannot even agree on, you know, the constitution of IEBC commissioners. We do not have time. March 2024 is literally around the corner. IEBC has already asked for 18 months extension. So this delay, we cannot agree, you know, on certain issues that are very, very pertinent, especially when it comes to election preparedness. Where does this put us then?
I hope and I pray that the government of the day, being on the driver's seat, is going to really fast track the issues of IEBC. You realize that the problems you are having, especially with the Chelela 4, it was one when the Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and the Honorable Right Honorable Prime Minister met and did that famous handshake. One of the things that they actually lowercased was the issue of IEBC. The way Chelela and the other commissioners were appointed haphazardly, that one I cannot fail to say. It was very late, it was not in time, and therefore the preparedness of the IEBC was put on jeopardy. It is one of the main reasons why we are where we are, because so the government
of the... sort of like intentional in terms of who exactly we are handpicking to,
you see
at the end
of the day, there was a provision of the law on how they needed to be handpicked. And because that that particular formula had to do with the president and what have you, they decided to do what is called backpedaling, but time was still going fast and 2022 was approaching. So the onus on this government is to have the IEBC constituted properly and early enough, because the IEBC that we expect to have is going to have a lot of on its shoulders. If people would remember Hesbon, they were here when we were demarcating the 2010 constitution. We were trying to demarcate the country after the 2010 constitution to come up with the new constituencies and everything. It was a lot of work. And this time, the IEBC that is going to be constituted will have two major important work, because this is that from when we started the new grammar for the new constitution in 2007, this is the second, is it the third re-election we are having, from the re-election of Mwai Kibaki, the re-election of Uhuru Kenyatta, and now we are going to have another third re-election of William Ruto, and we will have now the work of delimiting the boundaries. So it is on us. In fact, I agree with Noldin. The first agenda of that committee should be to reconstitute the IEBC, because even if I and Hesbon and Noldin and yourself go to that committee to present our issues on the boundaries and what have you, it will be an exercise in futility as long as the IEBC that is supposed to do that work is not properly in place. So as a matter of priority, IEBC should take the center stage of the discussion. It should be a subject now being discussed in the corridors of parliament, that we need to constitute IEBC as soon as we can, because we are now less 4 years, by the way. We are 3 years and something to the election. That's the honest truth. And if we do not get it right, it is going, number one, to be difficult for us to manage the two affairs that the IEBC needs to do. And number two, we do not want to look at a tainted re-election or otherwise of 2027. And that will be based on how professionally, how quick, and how coordinated are we going to institute the new IEBC.
Okay. How about we take a break on that note? Hesbon, I promise, I will start with you. So we'll come back. Excuse me, from the break and this morning, again, like we said, we are tackling very, very major issues that as far as the dialogue committee is concerned, and that is on the IEBC riddle, commissioners, boundaries, delimitation, headache, and as well as the dialogue committee. Time is not on our side, and this is as far as the 2024 March deadline. So then what needs to happen? Is this a looming political crisis, and what will that mean for the 2027 general elections? So much to discuss, so we're coming back after the break. Stay with us. This is AM Live.
A perfect family is not always what it seems.
Hapa hakuna mtu anaweza kunificha kitu.
The War of Succession is on. Inca series starts October 9. Only on Maisha Magic Plus channel 163 on DSTV, GoTV channel 3.
Baby girl, si unakumbuka leo ndo ile day ya bashing yetu tulisema tutaenda. Usikose?
Ai, mimi nikose. Ai, mbona gari ni KDB na kwa app imeandikwa KCW?
Sasa wewe kwa nini uko na maswali sigiste? Si haja bora ufike. Penikule kichwa.
Little. Safe, reliable, and convenient rides. Download Little app and start riding today.
Sasa unaweza furahia videos bila wasiwasi. Buy any Safaricom weekly bundle and get 500 MB of YouTube free to enjoy videos made for you. Furahia michezo utakavyo. Jielimishe, ujiinue kimaisha. Ingia Zone na YouTube. Get free 500 MB of YouTube when you buy any Safaricom weekly bundle. Just dial *544# au tembelea my Safaricom app today.
Get ready to dive into the pearls of a generation that's shaping the future.
On this new season of Speaking of Gen Z, we uncover stories and emotions behind relationships, friendship, family, and much more.
It's not about the miles between us, it's about the connections we share. And this is the Strings Attached edition.
Baby, come give me something. Oh.
Can we talk about situationships?
And my happiness comes first.
Speaking of Gen Z podcast, the Strings Attached edition. Wednesdays from 10 a.m. on Nation FM and Nation.Africa.
Welcome to Speaking of Gen Z.
I'll be like 10 minutes.
Visit Nation.Africa. To catch the best of lifestyle and entertainment. Keep an eye on education and gender issues. Get electrified with the latest sporting action. Stay informed as we unravel intriguing undercover investigative stories. And enjoy comprehensive coverage from award-winning journalism and reporting, including politics, expert opinion, and breaking news. Settle for more content in great packages on any device. Nation.Africa. Empowering society positively.
Xavi Hernandez is a Barcelona icon for all he achieved as a player, captaining the Catalans and lifting countless trophies along the journey. And now, Xavi is instilling a winning culture at Barca as a manager, with recent success further elevating his status as a club legend.
And people come in and they're like, oh, it works. I can have ice cream and I'm not in any discomfort. I recommend Sensodyne because it works. It's brilliant.
Following the gazettement of Two Rivers as a private, services-focused special economic zone, the first one of the kind in Kenya, there is no better time to own a home at Two Rivers than now. Text the word Cascadia to 22365.
All right, welcome back. The show is AM Live, 30 minutes past the hour. Very limited time we have to end the conversation this morning. And we're looking at the IEBC riddle, Commissioner's Boundaries Delimitation headache. And this is as far as the Dialogue Committee is concerned. The IEBC at some point was pushing for its boundary review mandate to be, given to another commission. And this is, a draft of proposals that, again, was given to the National Dialogue Committee. But however, there are conversations around, changing of the same and what the law says as far as moving this to a different commission. Someone else says, listen, there is no time. All right. So it's like nobody is ready for the boundaries delimitation exercise. What do you make of this? The fact that nobody is technically ready.
Well, I think the law as it is right now, that's just the function of IEBC. And I think that's why most people are clear that the immediate thing we need to focus on is the reconstitution of IEBC.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm of a different opinion that it's not a question of reconstituting IEBC. I think we've done that enough times. We did that after Kivuitu. We hounded Isaac Hassan and the other commissioners out of office. We constituted Chebukati and his team. I mean, there were resignations. We brought in the Cherera 4 and all that. So reconstitution has really never been the problem. I mean, you can sit down and reconstitute. I think for me, it's a question of how do we get it right in the reconstitution of IEBC, and then how do you ensure that the issues of boundaries delimitation, is within one, the purview of IEBC, and they have the necessary infrastructure to do the work. You remember, I mean, I agree with folks who are talking about having the boundaries and delimitation function with another commission.
Yeah.
Because as it were, what we have today was actually done by the Andrew Ligale, I don't know whether it was a commission or a body or whatever it was, but it was a very lengthy process, very engaging.
Yeah.
but still within the purview of what Isaac Hassan's IEBC was doing. So because it is the Interim and Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission that launched it. So at the end of the day, I mean, the election is in 2027. There is no rush. We have legislators, we have the constitution, and the people who can ratify anything that goes the constitutional way. All we need to do is get it right. So let us get as many views as possible. Let us discuss these different views that are coming on board, look at the rationale for each, the pros and cons, and come up with something that will solve our problems once and for all. Number two, I think we've also talked about the issue of political interest and public interest. I mean, there'll always be dialectics between public and political interest. And there's no political conversation that will go ahead without the political elite having their own interest. Look at BBI. I mean, there was a lot of political interest that was out in the air. And for some of us who supported BBI, we were deliberate that for any process that politicians are pushing their interests, as the public, we just need to be vocal enough to ensure that even our interests ride on the political interest so that we get what we want. And that's the thing right now. I mean, we could be thinking that politicians have their way, but we can't leave it and say they have their way. We have to push what we want so that at the end of the day, it is a percentage of political interest and public interest. And the more we push conversations around issues, the more we'll get the public interest accommodated. Then there's the success of counties in the last 10 years. I mean, we can't say that we've only succeeded in devolving, you know, bad manners, things like corruption in the last 10 years. You know, Kenyans must start, you know, running away from self-negation. It's not like everything that happens in Kenya is bad. I mean, we might have had some few errant first-generation governors who plundered and all that. But I think our devolution story is a success story. In the last 10 years, we've managed to devolve functions to 47 governments. And we need to give ourselves a pat in the back, you know. And even as we continue with the conversations around strengthening devolution, we just need to ask ourselves, what is it that has worked? What is it that has not worked? And what is it that we need to do? You know, corruption has always focused on the national government. And we have so many scandals at the national government. Why? It is because the spotlight is on the national government. How about now transferring that to the county government and saying that we've devolved billions to this county government? You know, in some counties it has worked, in some it has not worked. What is it that is not working? Corruption. So how do we strengthen institutions at the local level? How do we strengthen representation at the county assembly level? And then how do we engage the public in each and every county so that they hold the county government accountable? And how do we provide an enabling environment where everyone shares in what is going on in these counties? So if you ask me, I mean, we've had serious success with our devolution in the last 10 years. And because right now we have majority of the second generation government governors, we just need to be vigilant. How do we transfer you know, the framework that has put the national government on check to the county government, including the media? I mean, we cannot say that corruption has been devolved, yet we don't have stories of corruption followed consistently by the media and exposed through what I would like to call action by disclosure. By disclosing corruption at the county levels, I think the media shall have done its work, and the rest will be left to the other agencies. And then lastly, let me just say that when you talk about the proposals that we are seeing around you know, boundaries and counties, I think they were to a large extent addressed in the BBI. You know, the issue of representation. My problem with you know, the counties, or the, let me say, the regions that are calling for you know, establishment of counties, breaking away from the big counties. So Kuria, I come from Migori. I know there are only 2 constituencies in Kuria. Now, the reason why they are clamoring for a county of their own is not because they want a geographical region called a county. The interests there are issues of representation. You know, are they seeing themselves as part of the larger Migori County? You know, do they feel like the resources coming to Migori County are equitably distributed? So having many counties may not solve the problem of equity. So addressing equity and equitable representation, for me, would be a conversation that can subsume all these guys who are calling for counties. Like, Suba is a minority in Homa Bay County. So if you give them a county, what exactly are you solving? Are you disenfranchising other people in Homa Bay if you don't address the issue of representation?
All right.
And if you talk about county governments and representation at the constituency level, if you have a strong legislative framework and you have MPs who represent their counties robustly, you won't have guys who would be crying, for instance, in Ruiru, that we are sharing the same resources in terms of CDF as folks from Lamu East, you know. And when you look at what goes to the individual households and families that vote for the MP in Ruiru, it is not equitable. So if you solve the issue of equitable representation, which was enshrined in the BBI, I'm not saying that the BBI was good or bad, but I think there are certain things. Like if you look at the proposal that at some point was mooted, it was not within the BBI. It was mooted about regional levels. I can tell you without any fear of contradiction, there is no county that can be taken away. From those 47, it can only increase. You cannot reduce.
You cannot reduce.
Now, if you increase, are you solving the problem? If you ask me, you're not solving the problem.
All right.
But if you strengthen equitable representation and find a way of creating another layer, for instance, to cater for the counties that are not viable. I mean, there are counties that are not self-sustaining, and we know that. They will always depend on the national government, and in case of any shocks, they'll be in trouble. So how do you address this issue? For me, those are the critical conversations that we should have as many people as possible go and articulate themselves at Bomas and give the team. Because there is a technical committee that now does the technical bit of it. Let us make a lot of contributions from all quarters of life, address as many issues that we want, then we give them that work. And Nurdin says that they're earning some allowance. Let them earn those allowances by working and collating and dealing with as many issues as possible.
We hold him responsible for that.
Okay, Nurdin.
You know, there's something he said about IEBC. You know, I believe the next commission that we have should not feature in one of their 1,000 ways to die.
Okay.
Because we've lost so many bid commissioners, bid people who have worked in IEBC, and we need to solve that. Because you see, we can't have a situation where people die courtesy of just working in IEBC. Number two, I do believe that we are lagging behind in matters IEBC because one, people say there's no rush. There is a rush. Because if you're trying to come up with new constituencies, for example, you need to make sure that you do that 12 months before the next election date. Now, if you don't do that, they won't apply in that election. That's number one. Number two...
We already missed out on 2022,
yes, that's number one. Number two, you look at the complaints IBC had last time. Funds were released too late. And that is why we ended up having some ballot boxes for governors in Mombasa and Kamega, where some say kulichezwa, but you know. So there were certain issues that we need to resolve. I believe the next election needs to be planned early in advance, so that we have a situation where we don't have IBC rushing towards the election. You are months to an election and ballot papers are not even here. And matters elections, we also need to come to a place where we move our elections from, you know, we just talked about corruption, from the issue of ballot papers to electronic. We have to think about that at the end of the day, because we can't be bragging about how we have super highways, how we are doing what. We have to change the way we do things as well. And that can only be done when you have a substantive IBC commission, when you have things rolling. Now, we talked about parliament. The reason why you see there is some level of public participation, I call it some level, the threshold will be known with the court case that we have, is because laws are going to be made after this process, courtesy of members of parliament. Because you remember, the leader of majority and leader of minority took the issues the committee is doing to parliament. So we are waiting a scenario where we do believe that this process is pegged towards having an amendment to the constitution. Because there has been a craze as to who will be the first to amend the constitution. I don't understand what the craze is, because I believe, one, does the constitution have issues? Yes, it has issues. But have we implemented it? No, we haven't. Has substantive and vigorous civic education on the same constitution been done? No, it hasn't. Because I can tell you for free, there are those people in this country who have never seen a physical copy of that constitution. And that is why during the campaign period, when the media stations were having debates, you'd see candidates be at pain to tell you what they will do once they get those seats. Someone is an MCA promising you things that are meant to be done by an MP. An MP is acting like a governor. A governor is acting like beyond his mandate. And that is why Kenyans will clap. Once they get into office, Since they can't deliver those things, you start asking them questions, it hits them. Oh, by the way, I can't do that.
Cannot do
so
that.
5 years of lied promises and they don't achieve.
Yeah.
So I believe we need to have substantive civic education on the Constitution as we gear towards whatever we are seeing, the amendments. But what I see is that he just talked about a referendum.
Yeah.
That is Article 255 of the Constitution. There are 10 clauses there that if anything you're trying to do that is towards amendments, if it touches on any 10 of them, a referendum is needed. But from what I'm seeing with the committee, they're trying to avoid a referendum by any cost. So they are going to try to amend the Constitution via Parliament, and we are waiting. Because if they do that, and they touch on anything that is under the 10 clauses in Article 255, the words that were said to the BBI brothers will be the same words said to them. That will be null, and that will be void. And we go back to square one.
All right.
That is why I said, we need to have a scenario where the talks they are having are people-centric. We just talked about political interest. There is a saying that political interest, politics is the art of making personal interest look like public interest.
Okay.
So we will weigh the public interest in quote I put it that will come out of the discussion. At the end of the day. The public interest that comes out will either be void or will actually make sense.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I see that. Peter, very quickly. Again, so get our priorities right. And you know, someone was saying reconstituting, you know, the IEBC, the commissioners, right? It's one thing, but that is not enough. We should also make it in a way that people, and that is the public, can trust these commissioners to do their job and do their job impartially. All right. So the big question is then, how do we get there, and how do we get it right, so that come 2027 we do not have, you know, whatever we experienced, you know, previous
one
elections.
of the things I will say, and I agree with Hesbon 100%, is that we need to prioritize other conversations for Kenyans to buy into this conversation. Because no hungry Kenyan will buy into a conversation of changing an IEBC commissioner or doing that. So what is of paramount importance to that jobless Kenyan in Migori, where Hesbon comes from, or in Ndeya, Limuru, where I come from, it is to earn a livelihood. So I think for me that what we need to do for Kenyans to buy into this conversation is that we need to do these things concurrently. Even as we are pushing the Bomas agenda with the committee, we must also push the agenda that the government promised Kenyans to provide jobs, to provide avenues where they can make their means of life. So that is one way. Let me tell you, it is easier to convince a very full Kenyan than convincing a Kenyan with an empty stomach. So what we must do as we speak about IEBC and everything, for this conversation to become relevant to Kenyans, we must address their plight, and their current need right now it is to put food on the table and take their kids to school. And this must be done so that the government agenda of changing the livelihood of Kenyans must not be forgotten in this entire conversation. So the conversation we are having currently, it is interesting their rights, it is interesting the people in the positions of leadership, it is interesting the scholars like Hesbon who can do more academic papers on the process. They find a place to like because that is what they do. But are we bringing on board the local Kenyan who comes from my village who doesn't have something to eat currently? And that is why some of us are getting involved. You have heard Hesbon talking about us coming up with county aggregation and industrial parks. I can tell you today we are opening county number 12 from here headed to Meru to open a county aggregation and industrial park. Why? The idea is to aggregate the agricultural products of those Kenyans. Because if you go to Nyandarua, once they grow potatoes, all of them, there is an influx of that in the market. These things are perishable, so they get wasted. So what do? You need to aggregate some so that they can be kept in cold rooms. That cannot be kept in cold rooms need value addition to become something else that can prolong the shelf life. So those are the needs that we need to do to Kenyans, and that is why especially the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry is involved in inaugurating all the 47 county aggregation and industrial park. The idea it is to aggregate the farm products that Kenyans are producing. You go to places like Busia, they are cotton is getting down to waste. So government is doing a county industrial aggregation and an EPZ to help. Once you are able to show Kenyans that you are concerned about their needs and their prides, then you can bring them and loop them in the conversation of who are we going to pick as an IEBC commissioner, why are we changing this boundary or that. They will enjoy it because they see the fruit of actually participating, because that is a part of electioneering process. By changing IEBC and boundaries, it's part of electioneering process. For Kenyans to feel part and parcel of it, he must be getting results on what the government promised. So once we entertain those two, then Kenyans can be able to be interested in the conversation of IEBC boundary. But if we do that without involving, and I am glad the government continues to push the agenda of, despite the challenges that are coming, they continue to push the agenda of resolving the life crisis of Kenyans, then they would be interested in joining this discussion, and we can all move in one systemic process of saying we are picking Winnie, we are picking Hesbon, we are picking this from a point of understanding, because that is where we fail as the politician. Even Noldin can tell you there is no expert in this world like a Kenyan. If it is a footballing season, Kenyans are good. If it is the IEBC and whatever, Kenyans know. So the idea of taking Kenyans for granted in these processes, it is going to backfire on you. And I agree with you. If you look at Article 89 of the Constitution, but then people must know that it has never and it does not talk about adding constituencies. It talks about amending boundaries and names. So if you want to add constituencies, you must change clause 1 that says there shall be 290 constituencies. However formula you use, the constitution is very critical, 290. So if I have seen people saying which constituencies will be scrapped, there is no constituency that is being scrapped. Only boundaries may change or names might change, but there will be 290 constituencies. So whatever that committee does, if we want to have more than 290 constituencies, you cannot evade a referendum if that is the case.
And that is the whole process. All right, so we need to end the conversation in the next 3 minutes or so, and I want us to look at if things continue the way they are right now, you know, in terms of the committee and the leaders, you know, not agreeing, you know, on a few things here and there, derailing the entire process and you know, the whole IEBC mess as well. What impact does this have on 2027 general elections? I know, Hesbon, you said, you know what, we still have some time, but really, do we have the time?
If you ask me, the urgency is not to get it done. The urgency is to get the right thing, right thing done. And I think I would stick to that. That I mean, no one should be under pressure to do it. But people should just put themselves in this situation where they're doing the right thing. Their conscience is clear that they're doing what Kenyans want. Political interests, you know, and already there are political interests. I mean, even the constitution of that bilateral talk in itself tells you that there are politicians who are not comfortable by the fact that the two are co-chairs, you know. Because again, it gives them some sort of prominence. But there are a number of things that we cannot run away from. The reason why probably people are talking about we have to do it quickly, it is clear. No one is going to run away from a referendum. If the two, I mean, if the bilateral interests are anything to go by, there's no way you're going to entrench CDF, for instance, in the constitution without a referendum. There's no way you're going to deal with issues of representation without a referendum. There's no way you're going to change the structure of government by introducing the official opposition leader and introducing, you know, the prime cabinet secretary without a referendum. So whichever direction we go, whether we go the parliamentary or the popular route, there is certainly going to be a referendum. That one, anyone can take to the bank, unless they want to scuttle the whole process. But if this process is going as it is, we'll have a referendum. But let me run away from that, because you've told us you only have
2 minutes actually now.
Let me talk about two things. We talked about the deaths in campuses. Now, my entire life after high school I've spent in campus. Apart from the 2 years when we had a political party that was funded after the 2007 general election. So I've spent my entire life in campus as a student, as a faculty, and now as a senior faculty, I would want to say.
Yeah.
I've been there for like the last 10 years, so I must say, and there are certain things. I've talked about the role of the universities in understanding the current crop of students.
Yeah.
But I think any government worth its salt must ensure that no life is lost by people who are just pursuing their interests to make their lives better.
Yeah.
Now, the 7 university students that we have on the front page of the Daily Nation actually representative of parents all over this country who had hopes in their kids, educated their kids. And I don't think they were looking at their kids going to campus to die. They were looking at their kids going to campus to address, you know, I mean, chant their own path.
Yeah.
And probably, you know, for most of us, I mean, going to campus was a poverty eradication kind of, you know, pathway. So it is not just a question of losing this student. It's a question of what has it done to the community that believed so much in taking their kids to campus. In the villages where these students are coming from, what is it done to the next generation of kids? Because, you know, the current generation of kids that you're raising are very susceptible to trauma. They get stuck in an elevator and they won't do an elevator again. So your friend goes to campus and like in one of the private universities, in the first week they die. What does it do to you in terms of thinking about campus? My daughter keeps telling me, I need to go to your university, we need to come to your university. And my boss was telling me, bring them, let them see the facility that we have. Why? Because then it gives them a higher aspiration. That campus is where people go. And then lastly, because lastly, the industrial parks. You know, I mean, the 12th county that they are going to, it's a big thing. I think we've known Honorable Moses Kuria for so many other things. It's about time we started conversations around the industrial and aggregation parks. Because this is one of the key things that, for me, would address the interest of common mwananchi, so that even if you're talking about IEBC, you'll be thinking, I have my needs sorted, so I can go to secondary needs like IEBC. But the critical thing for me is, if you set up an industrial park in Migori County, you set another one in Nyandarua, another one in Meru, and you're looking at value addition, aggregation, and all that, without increasing the capacity to produce. You know, Nyandarua might be having a lot of potatoes, but I think in Migori probably we need a lot more. We need a lot more in terms of production, so that that industrial park has something coming in. But what am I talking about? I mean, we need to see a lot of conversations between the Trade and Investment Ministry and the Ministry of Cooperative Development that deals with the Hustler Fund. How do we get enterprises funded, not through loans, the way the Hustler Fund is doing it, but at the SMEs and MSMEs level through both loans and grants, and these grants should be pegged on serious research on how these MSMEs or SMEs at the county levels would contribute, first of all, to the viability of the industrial park and creating employment in these counties. I think those are conversations that we may need to take a lot more forward and have more people talk about them at the county level.
Now here's when you're eating into Nurdin. I literally have 30 seconds for you, Nurdin.
Wow, so I have to keep it short and sweet.
Please, if you can.
So, you know, for me, I'll end it with those who we pay to work for us, those members of parliament, courtesy of representation. I have an issue with how we are deploying police officers to Haiti. No public participation has been done. Members of parliament are silent. I had an issue with what the Minister of Education was trying to do, matters of education. Now parliament woke up because there was no legal framework. So you cannot have a situation where it's action-reaction. They need to rise to the occasion and understand that public participation and more or less representation, which they do, is key. So that the executive needs to be in check. But you have a scenario where those who are in Kenya Kwanza forget that oversight is a part and parcel of their duty and not on Azimio. So they need to rise up to the occasion, smell the coffee. If they don't have, you guys can be serving them and bill them afterwards. Because at the end, of course, you have good coffee. Because at the end of the day, if they don't, Kenyans will suffer. We have scenarios where the executive goes beyond its mandate. And when those who are in parliament are quiet, what happens to the Kenyans that are meant to be represented? When there's no representation, there's no governance.
No representation, no governance. Can I trust you with 30 seconds,
Yes,
Peter?
I think I would say that the process that is going on at Bomas has the members of parliament fully doing it. and I pray that the members of the executive, just like what Moses Kuria at the CS Investment, Trade and Industry is doing, open up county aggregation, that every member of the cabinet will understand his role and do it diligently. Then Kenyans can be seeing the results on the ground, and the members of parliament can be entrusted with the process. So let them do things concurrently, and we ensure that we address the plight of Kenyans everywhere, and wish Kenyans that even as government is doing its job, do your part. Let us build this nation, and tomorrow we will be happy of what we achieve.
I see that. All right, so allow us to say goodbye right here. Here's when you ate into other people's time, so allow us to say goodbye.
He's used to. We need to put a timer there.
But when you ring it, I've got to respond to 2 people.
So you have to take too much time. All right, Hezbon Hassan Ewile, political communications expert, Nurdin Kagai, advocate of the High Court, as well as Peter Mushendu, governance and data analyst. Clearly 2 hours is not enough. You need like 5 hours of this conversation. But allow us to say goodbye right here on AM Live. My name is Winnie Lubembe. I'm going to see you in the next few minutes on Your World. But until then, let's keep the conversation going as far as the ongoing dialogue. See you soon.